Well, I'm building a desktop. So I went ahead and bought some Western maple, and I got about 38 board feet here. And I'm gonna make a table that is a tabletop that is 30 inches wide by 5 feet long. And I'm just gonna maintain this 2-inch thick surface and watch out for staples. But part of the fun here is that I just went to this wood store and I paid $375, $350 a board foot for this stuff. So it's not cheap, it's less expensive than if I were to buy like a butcher block top. So I thought that was kind of interesting. If you want a really finished flat surface, buy a butcher block, but I don't really care about that too much. It's gonna be my desk for work, my home office, and I thought, let's get some maple. Looks great, got lots of character. It's not perfectly straight. So anyway, kind of a fun project. It shouldn't take too long. I'm just going to use, for the most part, my joiner plane, my number 8 joiner plane, and I may have to do some rough cuts just to get, you know, this nice and straight. Yeah, so lots of fun. Boy, and I just love this texture. It's a little closer here. This may not come through. Oh, it does. You can see it. So it's got a really nice pillowy texture to it, and I'm really curious to see if I can maintain that. Now this board is a 12-inch wide, 2-inch thick slab, so it's a very large piece. It was a 10-foot. I had them cut down to length, so 5 feet basically. I could have gone to a 6-foot, but I thought 5 feet is going to be just fine for this desk. So now I'm just kind of going through this. I've got a couple splits. Let's see if I can get that. So there you can see it. So it's got a split right in the middle here. I'm tempted to bow tie these. It's kind of a fun thing to do. And certainly at the ends. Let's see if this one comes through. There's the end of this. I've got some splits here. Now they don't go all the way to the end, and they're very likely to open up at some point. But I think these are also bow tie, maybe a little epoxy filler, just to keep them from popping open. But looks good. Lots of material to work with. Even if I lose a little thickness, still got plenty. All right, just got to make sure these staples are out, because these always catch you at the wrong time. Just gonna touch up my iron here. It's not terrible, but let's make that better. There we go. Okay. Just love this plane. It's such a high quality piece of equipment. Everything just locks in place. Okay, so here I'm just kind of playing with the wood a little bit. Again, I want to just make sure that I'm getting to know it. So I want to know like which way this grain is best playing. So it's definitely got there's definitely a cup that's doing this. Okay, so here I'm just getting rid of the cup. I'm not going after it super hard. I just want to kind of explore the surface here. So you can hear it's cutting at either side. Not in the middle. And if I blow this edge out, I don't care too much because I'm going to have to rip that anyway. what I'm trying to do is expose some of this grain because I want to be able to pick the top here in a little bit. And this is just, wow, it's just so beautiful. Man, look at that. And I'm just checking to make sure I'm not changing dimensions. That's the one thing. I don't want to work too much on one area and then have it be a dip or a hollow, which is actually kind of hard to do with this guy. But like I'm doing a little bit of a scant cut, just where I'm cutting at an angle a little bit, just to help the plane cut better. But what I know is if I start to make a cut all the way across the surface, then I know that I'm more or less flat, and I can tell I'm getting there, and I can even see it. So you edge up on the plane further, you can see about here, it's much better. Lots of ways to flatten boards. You can use a router. You can make a little router sled and just go back and forth until you have achieved flatness. That's a good way to do it. You can use a thickness planer. That also works really well. But there's no reason to use power tools when we have hand planes available to us. Again, this is it's a number 8, which is just monstrous. You're going to get a workout. If you have a plane like this, you are going to get strong. I can guarantee it. I'm just feeling for that cut all the way across. Okay, that's good enough for now. Let's look at the other side. Well, this side's a little better condition overall. And this one reasonably has a arch in the middle, which actually is a little bit trickier to get out because what will happen is your plane will high center and then roll. It'll kind of go up and then down. So you have to, this is a little trickier. So here, just sort of knowing it, I want to make sure I'm keeping the plane reasonably flat if I can. And just make short little jabs in the middle. Again, knowing that that's where the material is. So there's the surface. And most of the milling marks out. There's a couple scratches with my plane as it went this way, but that pillowing looks just epic. So when I do this, I'm putting a lot of weight on the front of the plane so that the nose is always referencing off this middle. So when I'm chipping away at this high spot, this cup, I'm making sure that I'm not rounding it, because if I were to tilt back at all, I would round it rather than flatten it. So that's why I'm putting a lot of pressure on my left hand. I think what I'll do now is go ahead and join the two edges. So I've got two faces to join together, get it ready for glue. So at the start, you're only going to cut a very small amount, so there's almost no friction because you're just knocking off these little tiny high spots. So as I go, I'm just going to get progressively more and more cuts, more and more resistance. See these little saw marks? Trying to get rid of those. So what I want is a smooth face, and basically I want a cut that goes all the way across these two pieces. Now what you don't want to do is work too much on one part of this, because you'll end up with a dip or a low spot, and just again take small swipes all the way across the length until you've got rid of all these low spots. Now I'm looking for that full length cut. And I'm almost there. And again, I'm going for this angle here. This does not have to be a perfect 90 degree. In fact, I'm not a perfect 90 degree. It's very close, but it's not perfect. What's really important that these two angles, these two faces that join, are complementary angles. So I know that seems a little overly simplistic, but if the two angles sum to 180, they're complementary. And it'll result in a flat surface. So that's what I'm looking for here. That is, this joint is done. Heavy. Oh yeah. So those two edges, you can see. They are very tight. Now in the middle, this is where clamping might be. I don't actually know if the clamp will get rid of that. I might have to test. Okay, well that was able to squeeze it out pretty easily. I mean, a pipe clamp is just, it's just a beast. So what I'm gonna do is glue this side, and then I'm gonna rejoin this side once the glue joint's all set up. I ordered some of these Bessie 1/2 inch. I have another one already. So you just buy the clamp heads, and in this case I just have a 3-foot piece of pipe. This is 1/2 inch galvanized. This clamp I can get the most pressure of any of my clamps. And so I thought I'd get 2 more just to make sure I had enough coverage for this. And these were surprisingly cheap, $13 I think for each one. And I like this H style they call it, which has a nice surface to stand on. You can see that. All right, 2 new clamps. Okay, so I'm ready for glue. Just to make sure I've got coverage. I'm gonna get a little mess on the bench, but that's okay. By the way, shavings make great glue cleanup. Alright, so here's a better look at this. Alright. Oh, I let this bake for probably 5 hours. Oh, this is where, okay, there we go. This other side, is this gappy? Oh, that's tight. Oh, that's good. All right, so well, that's way off. just fitting this guy. Of course, this is the bottom here. And I've got, this is way out of whack. All right, so I've got to do a little fitting. So I've got the same thing. I've got a little bit of a wow in the middle, and I need to fix it. Wonky. Okay, let's see what that does. Oh, see that pattern? It's just gorgeous. Okay. And I want to not beat up the edges. I think I still have a hollow. I have a feeling. Yeah, just a little bit though. Fits better. So we want to get rid of that. I think this is ready for glue. I'm going to double check a few things, get it on the bench, and glue it up. And I think we got a slab ready. Adjusted the middle so it's flush, and then I just clamped it real hard. And what I want to try to do is get this to come down. Oh, this might not work. Let's see if I can coerce it down just a little bit. Oh, that'll work. All right. Moment of truth. All right. So one issue is if you are taking a lot of material off the top like this, your number 8 plane, you might have it set up to take very fine shavings, and you've got a nice edge on your iron, and you don't want to necessarily take a lot of material off with this setup. So in that case, you can take your jack plane, which maybe you don't use that much, like I don't, and you can set up your blade as a gouge iron. And what that means is that you have a little bit of a shape to it. So it is set up to gouge and take a lot of material off, basically on the very tip of the iron. So that's what I'm doing here. Is I've shaped this a little bit ago, now I'm just going to put an edge on it, and this will allow me to take a lot more material quickly off this top. I could also go and have it sanded. There is a place in Portland that could do this for me. I'm on the fence. I might call them and see what they charge me to do that, but I'm going to work on this a little bit more. So I've got this middle piece is just a little bit higher than the surrounding pieces. So I'm just working at it gently to bring it down. This is what maple does crosscut. So now I'm just, for lack of a better way to describe this, when I'm cutting like this, it's just polishing the surface. And I'm just cutting these wafer thin ends. I could just go sand this right away. I could just sand all these cut marks out of it, but the nice thing with sort of using this big plane is I can continue to flatten it, and the finish it leaves is better than a sanded finish. I mean, it's super polished. So I'm just making my way slowly across the board, and so far I haven't made a lot of progress. I've got from basically here to here is shiny, but you can see I've still got some I guess low spots here, and these have my side cuts. But down here it's just the grain's just super smooth. Basically finished grain here. There's some here too, but it's rough, and it's just, let's see all these score marks here. But I don't have a good smoothing plane, and that's kind of my, could be my next purchase. Supposedly this base can lift 300 pounds. The top, I calculate, I haven't weighed it yet, but I calculate it's about 100 pounds. So it's pretty heavy. It feels very solid. So now what I want to do is square it up. I've got to trim these edges, square it. I've got to prepare this, and then I'm going to cut a bevel. And I'm going to opt, I had this rip blade on here, so I'm going to take that off and put on the 60 tooth guy for this crosscut, see if I can make this nice and clean. Well, I don't like this. It's too rounded, it's too cartoony, and now I have a hole in my desk. I've just ruined the whole thing. It's not good. Okay, but the good thing is I can just make a bigger one. It's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this, make it a little more angular. I want it like this. I want it choppy. I want it to be like a cut. A cut. Oops, how do I do this cut? Nothing like a sharp saw. And a bad voice. Okay. Okay, that looks good. So we'll just trace this new path. Okay. And look at that. Cool. Let's see how deep I can get these guys. Okay, so I think I'm about ready for epoxy. I've cleaned up the edges on these butterflies. They're perfectly smooth. I've got a little bit of intrusion into the surrounding material here. And I think it's part of the side effect of sanding it when the glue is wet, is that some of the Purple Heart sort of bled into these low regions. So it's sort of a victim of my own development here. But the edges are nice and sharp, which I like, except for that. I may work on that a little bit longer before I seal it and make it permanent, but these look good. That looks good. This one's good edges on it. So, yeah, I like that. Oh yeah. Oh boy, this green. It's gonna look good. Well, one thing I didn't really think about too much when I put this epoxy down is that I tinted it. I tinted it black, and I didn't seal the wood. So, it's still setting up. This is still a little sticky, but I'm a little worried that I dyed the wood, which is not good. So, I should have sealed it with shellac or even a light coat of clear epoxy before putting black dye all over this raw piece of maple. Part of woodworking is how you recover from mistakes. All right, so I'm putting this water-based one-coat solution on. It's supposedly not yellowing, so that's why I'm putting it on. So, plus it doesn't stink. It's really heavy. Let's see here. Whew. Okay, well, one last coat, or a second coat, I should say. Yeah, I did not sand this last layer enough. There's some cracks at the very end of the table that I filled with epoxy. The first time around, I filled it with the black epoxy, which I kind of like. Got a little busy over here. I'm not sure if I like these little stabs, but I like kind of the deep black cuts because it's part of the wood. I like that. But what I didn't do correctly is I went to fill the end, which is clear epoxy, and it pulled it into the end of the fibers. And I didn't make sure I had a good saturation color all the way across. So I left it kind of blotchy, thinking that the finish, the varnish, would go and fill in the end grain that wasn't filled by the epoxy, and it ended up with a very blotchy surface. So I think if you're going to use epoxy to end grain, seal it first with something, or just make sure you have a good coverage all the way through. So I'm not even sure what I'm going to do with this, because every time I try to fix it, it just seems to not get any better. So I might sand it down and maybe do an epoxy blend. So I don't know. It's tricky because the end grain, again, it's like a bunch of straws, and it just sucks up whatever you're putting in. And if pores are filled with a varnish, they're not going to be the same color as the epoxy, and then you end up with this blotchiness, and it's driving me nuts. I don't have any good ideas yet. But I am really happy with the Purple Heart, how it really turned purple with the varnish. Like, this is a much lighter color before the varnish hit it, and I'm really happy with that. It's a little bit jarring. But the same lesson here is that I didn't seal the end grain when I went, for instance, when I went to do the black dyed epoxy. I probably should have put a clear coat of epoxy over the surface first to seal the end grain, then do the colored epoxy, so it would essentially make a much crisper line on the edge of my butterflies. So that's another learning thing. Little learning tidbit. It doesn't look bad, but it's sort of like, I'm seeing every detail. And obviously down here, this little blip colored mark here was black dyed epoxy that I could not get out for the life of me. I must have taken a good 1/8 of an inch off the end here. Couldn't get it out. So it's just got a little fleck. I'm going to leave it as an artistic statement. But that's also kind of bothering me. So a couple lessons there I learned, I think the hard way, but all in all, I'm happy with it.